Good morning or good evening or wherever you are. Oops, forgot to turn the light on. Let's shed a little light on the subject. Better. Okay, good morning. And today we are going to talk about does not play well with others. Not the most, joyful topic. And I really want to bring this to your attention. This is something that impacted me as an employee and as a leader. And I've seen it affect teams, I've seen it affect productivity, I've seen it affect creativity, I've seen it create turnover. It's a problem. And I've seen too many organizations ignore it or move a leader from one location to another thinking that that will solve the problem, or giving them an extra week's vacation and thinking that's going to solve the problem. And most often, and even some training, I personally was sent to a lot of training that really didn't do much until I had a coach. All right, getting a little ahead of myself. We're looking at the solution. Let's talk about the situation. So we're going to delve into an issue that could be big in your organization, could be small, and wherever it's going on, it is causing issues. And I'm talking about the leaders who don't play well with others. And what I'd like to do is shed some light on both recognizing the issue, what the hidden costs are, and how you can address the issue. So we're going to do that all fairly quickly here. And if you have any questions, post them in the comments. If you're listening to the replay, please do put replay in the comments. And I'd love to hear, if you've got any of these situations going on and how you're resolving it, or what questions you have on how to make a difference with these leaders. All right. Let's first define the problem. And I'm going to share with you, I have this whole list of, I haven't had a chance. I did a talk, a very short 7-minute talk with a group yesterday on what does bad leadership look like? What does sufficient leadership look like? And then what does great leadership look like? And so you'll be hearing some of this throughout the next few weeks. But since it was just yesterday and I haven't had a chance to document all of these, I'm actually going to be looking at and talking from taking some of the thoughts from the folks in the room at this talk about what they thought bad leadership looked like. And does not play well with others is not always, bad leadership doesn't always equal does not play well with others, but it's pretty often that this happens. So oftentimes the does not play well with others has to do with a lack of communication, a lack of clear visionary communication. It can look like being rude, condescending, or abusive, a micromanager, someone who scolds employees and often publicly in front of others. They're a discourager. They have a negative attitude. They create a negative environment. We have micromanaging again. So they're managing and not leading. So big difference there, and we'll get into that in another one. But lack of communication again, not providing goals, in terms of helping employees, create their own goals, but not providing the goals, the bigger goals that they need to align to and connect to. They don't listen. They have an agenda. They're operating with an agenda. They don't listen. They have no clue how the process works. So they really are disconnected from the work. Now, there's a fine line that you need to operate with as a leader in terms of knowing every single detail about the operation and being able to lead it and understand the process so that you can actually provide support to your organization. Control syndrome puts people down, unable to delegate, lack of, they like to micromanage, they're a discourager. So we had a few things. They're in a bad mood all the time or most of the time. There's insecurity. They make bad decisions. There's no integrity. They're pushy. They're unsupportive. They're not empathetic. They operate with confusion, or neurosis, which is interesting because that's another one. They don't set expectations well. And that goes back to what I said earlier in terms of communication. They're not great at setting expectations. They're not great at creating healthy debate and healthy conflict. They are often creating destructive conflict, either from themselves or between people. And sometimes leaders will do that as a way to create conflict so they can come in and save the day. So that's what it looks like. Let's recognizing the issue. I'll give you an example. I worked with a division of a very large organization, and I worked with the CEO and his leadership team. And they had one leader who was often very loud in meetings. You could hear him down the hall. Was also, would often pound fists on the table, would really cut people off in conversations about projects that they were working on. He would really try to get his way about things. He wasn't open to other ideas. He wasn't open to other people's feedback. He wasn't open to brainstorming on ideas. He would cut ideas off during brainstorms. And it created a lot of tension, and it slowed things down. Projects were not moving forward in the leadership team, which meant that projects downstream were not getting done as well. So I won't get into what we did. I'll talk about that another time. And I think I brought it up on the live before. There's one thing that we did that actually created change very quickly in the organization, which was the SHIELD activity that we do. We did an offsite, and we had a lot of things around communication, and I'll share those at another time. Let's talk now about some of the costs of having a leader who does not play well with others. And one is the decreased productivity. So productivity is going to take a hit. It's going to take a hit across your leadership team. It is going to take a hit with the employees, because when employees are navigating conflict, or when they're avoiding, they're consciously avoiding a leader, they're not getting, they're not having the right conversations. They're not raising issues because they don't want to be the one to get yelled at because there's an issue. So you've got decreased productivity. They're trying to stay under the radar. They are, holding back. And this is where you might get some of what now we know as quiet quitting. So that's one thing. And if people get pissed off enough, if they get frustrated enough, then you get the next issue, which is high turnover. Your turnover, I know one leader, a woman I know, her husband works for a pretty large financial institution, and they have a leader who was promoted into a position that, one, he may have not been supported in all of the learning to be the leader in that position. He was very good technically in his role before, and he was sort of promoted beyond his capability and didn't have the support. And it was taking months to really figure out how to either get him back into a technical role or exit him from the organization. That was going to take months and months, because that's a process once they're in that position. And so the team that was working for this leader it was a revolving door on his team. People were either transferring to other teams or they were exiting the organization. And that is a huge cost. It's a huge financial burden, because it's going to take, and especially in an organization where everyone is salaried, it is at least 1 to 2.5 times their salary. So, and oftentimes even more, especially with the job market now and trying to find great talent. It is going to cost you a lot of money in terms of that turnover, just replacing one person. The knowledge that leaves, the what it takes to bring somebody in, all the hiring process, and then also the training and upskilling, anyone that you bring in. So morale, both employee and leadership. The morale amongst that leadership team that I worked with was horrible. And that's why they brought me in was, they were not moving forward on projects that they knew they needed to do in order to be successful. And things were not moving forward. People would agree in the room, and then outside the room, it was a whole different story. And so your employee morale is going to go down. When you have that environment of the lack of trust, the fear, then morale is down, which leads to your decreased productivity, which leads to your turnover. It leads to a lack of engagement, lack of creativity, lack of innovation. All of that takes a hit when you have leaders in the does not play well with others space. And then reputation damage. That leader, oftentimes those leaders are very smart. They have a lot to offer the organization, and their reputation is now taking a hit. So this is somebody who you probably value as a contributor, as some level of a leader, manager, contributor, and their reputation is taking a hit. Now, the other thing that happens is your company's reputation is going to take a hit. Your news travels fast. And when there are people in that organization where they are not, where they're being rude, where they're being condescending, where they are micromanaging, it is going to discourage clients from working with you. It is going to discourage partners from working with you. It is going to discourage customers. It's really going to, your company's profits and your revenue are going to take a hit. So what do you do? So first, let's go back. The hidden costs are decreased productivity, higher turnover, which lots of money in that, lower morale, both with your leadership team and your employee base, and, lack of creativity, lack of innovation, lowering engagement, and then the reputation damage that it does for that leader. People talk about the human aspect of the organization. This leader, their reputation is taking a hit, and it might also then translate to your organization taking a hit, your reputation, because this leader is creating havoc in your client base, in your vendor base, in your employee base, and that news travels fast. So those are the four things in terms of the costs. Let's talk about what you can do to address the issue. First is identify the problem and admit there's a problem. I see way too many organizations ignoring the issue. I have seen organizations move a leader from department to department or city to city, state to state, to different plants or different parts of the organization, and even promote these leaders without addressing the issue. Not good. Not a good idea. You need to recognize the signs of poor leadership. So that's lack of communication, inability to compromise, constant power struggles. I am all for healthy conflict, and I actually believe that people can raise their voices during healthy conflict. And when it gets personal, when it starts to be about the person and not really about the idea, and not generative. I know that's a strange word to use for conflict, but I love it, because if it's not actually creating something bigger and better in the end, then it's not productive. And so how can you help create, if you don't have that healthy debate, if you don't have that constructive conflict, that's a sign of a problem. Providing training and coaching. I, early in my career, and even a few times since, have gotten does not play well with others. And in the beginning, all I got was training. They sent me to training. And that training, it's what we call in the coaching that I do, focusing on the A model. Okay. Part of my issue, and I will share this is something that I do, is part of the reason that I had the does not play well with others is the work I was doing was not aligned to my talents. I built skills. I got very good at the work I was doing. Only it was sapping my energy and I didn't know it. And I will tell you that that is the situation with many of your employees and many of your leaders. If somebody starts to do something and they get good at it and you send them to more training and you develop that skill, only it isn't really something that is aligned to a core talent. And we can get into that in another call. But when you provide training, you want to make sure that that training is aligning to things that are part of their core talent. And if they really do want to skill up on something that isn't, then they have to know how to feed themselves, how to energize, how to resource themselves before and after those tasks that are sapping their energy. And oftentimes they don't even realize it. So I always like, if you're going to provide training in those situations, pair that up with coaching, because oftentimes everything we do is based on how we feel, and how we feel is based on how we think. And so if we're not making all of those connections and all you do is try to change what they do, if you're not addressing the thought and feeling patterns that are leading to what they're doing, you're never going to have sustainable change. Bottom line, if you're going to do training, really work with your HR team or work with a coach who can help really identify what are the core talents and how will coaching pair up and really amplify and make the training really anchored in that person's being and anchored and have sustainable change over time. And then really create an environment of feedback. You want to encourage employees to be able to bring forward their concerns about leadership and make sure that they feel that they can do that without fear of reprisal, that there's not going to be some sort of negative repercussion on them or their career in the organization. And then finally, in terms of addressing the issue, is lead by example. Talk about your leadership and make sure that your leadership has all of the things of great leadership. And we're actually going to go into that a little bit the next time. What does great leadership look like, and how does it benefit the organization? But really lead by example. Have those open feedback loops. Make sure that you are building trust. All the different ways that we've talked about in the past of how you're building trust. Are you creating an environment of healthy conflict? Are you doing all of the things that will build your organization and create an environment of encouragement, of engagement, of trust, of healthy conflict, of accountability, of people wanting to really, create the outcomes that you're trying to create in the organization? So when you have leaders or team members who don't play well with others, it really does come at a very high cost. And so you really want to prioritize creating trust, creating connection, creating team cohesion. You want to promote an inclusive, effective communication that's honest, that's candid, that's respectful. Make sure you have those feedback loops on an ongoing basis, not just when there's an issue. And then really make sure that you're building collaborative leadership. And we can go into that in another call or in another live. But really, you're creating an environment that is based on trust, that's based on respect, that attracts and retains the people that you want to keep in your organization. So thanks for joining me. And please, look at and address any issues you have. Reach out to me if you need some support in that training and coaching area, or even in developing a feedback loop, because that can be a challenge to get it started when people aren't necessarily used to providing that feedback. It takes a few, pre-steps to get there in terms of building the trust. And, I'd be happy to help if that's something that you'd like to address in your organization. We'll see you next week, and have a great rest of your week. If you're in the Wisconsin area where I am, please be safe. It is going to be very, very hot outside. We're not used to that. And it's super humid. So enjoy the day. Get out a little bit in nature if you can. Just not too long and stay hydrated. So have a great rest of your day. See you next week.